Hi, everyone. Brandon Furtick here with Minnesota Blockchain Initiative. This is the MN Blockchain Conversations podcast. And in this episode, I sit down and have a conversation with David Espindola. David is a Twin Cities resident. He is an expert and author on technologies, specifically how technology influences and affects humanity. He's also the CEO and founder of a consultancy called Brainius. Brainius works with organizations to help them integrate technology. In this episode, we sit down and discuss his career, we discuss his 2 books, and we discuss then the technologies, of course, that are within the chapters of his books. And we focus on 2, no surprise. There, we focus on AI and blockchain. So if you're interested in all of these exponential technologies, how they're changing our world, and how they intersect, then this is a great conversation for you. So enjoy my conversation with David Espindola. Thank you. All right, David, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's just jump right into it.
Yep.
Well, I'm here with David Espindola, AI researcher, expert, academic. I'll let you fill in the rest.
Well, I think I would say that I have, many years of experience working with information technology in general. And in the last few years, I have really focused on exponential technologies, these emerging technologies that are really changing our lives, business, society. Okay. And the one that really stood out to me was AI. And that's the one that I focused in on in the last couple of years. So I wrote my first book 3 years ago. And that book is called The Exponential Era. So what I tried to capture there, so the reason why I wrote that book is because I noticed that technology was changing at a much faster pace than we as humans are used to.
Yeah.
And it has significant implications from a business perspective, from a future of work perspective, and society in general. And so I tried to capture in that first book, I listed 8 platforms. Blockchain, robotics, material science, AI, obviously, that were growing at this exponential speed and that were converging, creating these combinatorial powers that are really incredibly powerful.
Wow.
So I was looking at it from a broader perspective, and my focus on that first book was really to help businesses deal with this change. In fact, we provided a methodology to help companies deal with all these things that were going on. And the methodology, I'm not reinventing the wheel with the methodology, really leveraging existing methods like lean and agile and design thinking to help companies think more dynamically about their strategic planning processes. So that was
the gist of the book. Are those formal thinking systems? Lean, agile, or are those just...
These are all methodologies that, people that are in the startup world, they usually know lean pretty well.
Is that an acronym?
It's just, it comes from lean manufacturing. So it really goes back to the Toyota production systems.
It's a system of doing things?
Yeah, it's a way to think about the way you do things, where you try to eliminate unnecessary steps.
Right.
And you lean out the process is the way to think about it.
Sure.
Design thinking is something that's been around for a while. It's really a way for you to do more ideation in a way that is more creative, that's more open. You diverge, you create several ideas, and then you try to converge to focus in on the ones that are really promising. And agile is a way for us it started really with software development. And we have a traditional software development method that is based on a traditional project management methodology. And what we realized within software development is that that process was taking too long, and you wouldn't find the issues until you got to the very end after the software was done. So that wasn't very helpful, because then you had to go back to the beginning, start all over again. So with Agile, you get the user involved very early in the process, and you start finding the problems very early. And that way you're able to change the way you're doing things as early as possible in that process. So that's just sort of an overview of how these methodologies are. And then what we try to do is we try to put them together within a framework for businesses to deal with change. Because it's all about change. It's all about how do you deal with changes that are primarily driven by technology.
Okay. And what I'm just immediately impressed by is just the scope with which you're looking at technology. And I take a big picture view of it myself. That's what got me interested in blockchain and how it can really change up the world, not in any one specific area, but period, society.
Right.
And yet you're doing that with multiple different technologies.
So the book has these 8 platforms that I thought were probably the most significant, the most impactful technologies that were, bringing all these changes to business, to society.
Well, that right there, if you just, that right there is super interesting. So did you have a list of like 20 technologies or 15 or 10? We got to narrow these down.
Yeah. So a lot of it is just how you categorize it. So for instance, one of the ones that I talk about is material science.
Yep.
Well, material science is pretty broad, right? It's a pretty broad term. So you could, break that down into, nanotechnology. You could break it down into some other, material science related technologies. The other that I talk about is biotechnology. Well, biotechnology, again, is pretty broad. So it depends on how you categorize them.
Okay.
Some thought leaders categorize them differently than I did, so you may hear about 12, 15 of these platforms.
Yeah.
But I try to keep it to those 8 just to keep it simple and keep it more consumable.
I kind of want to jot these down. Do you have them all? Do you know them off the top of your head?
Wow, good question. Do I?
Let's quiz you.
Let's try.
Well, I know one is blockchain.
Yeah, blockchain for sure.
And one is AI.
One is AI.
And one is material
Science, biotechnology.
Biotech.
Robotics. Internet of Things. So how many do we have there?
That is 6, my friend.
6. Okay, so what else do we have? So we have 3D printing.
I thought that might have been materials, but okay.
Yeah, well,
again,
so
the overlap
3D
issue.
printing uses a lot of the materials that fall into that material science category.
Right.
And so, what's the other one?
We need a Family Feud board. We got one answer left up on the board. You're gonna get an X if you get it wrong.
So AI, blockchain, material science.
How about like, is biotech like food and GMO? Is that biotech?
So, so I kept biotech fairly general. So any technology that impacts biology in general falls under a category. Things like, DNA.
I see.
And, stem cells.
Got it.
And, a lot of it is related to health, to the health industry.
Got it.
But we're just making incredible progress, from a biotechnology standpoint. And then you converge that with AI, and now you got a really powerful combination that I think
that's
is going
where
to bring
your book could be just a tome
changes.
and I could see a series of books on this. Yeah, like the way that they all interact. So the one I hear about a lot. So in the past, I'd say 2-3 years ago, blockchain, right? I mean, there was a company that changed their name to blockchain, and their stock went way up, because they added blockchain to it or something. I can't remember what the product even was. It had nothing to do with blockchain.
Oh, I know what
was
the next one is.
It was Long Island iced tea.
Oh, okay.
Or something like that.
Yeah, some beverage that changed it, put blockchain in their company and info or something. But then AI came around and sort of took over the technology.
Yep.
But I hear about how blockchain and AI will blend because we'll need some sort of verification.
Correct.
Technology.
Yep.
Because AI is going to be generating all this stuff. We'll need some proof of ownership, proof of origin, and blockchain can be that immutable record.
Right.
But I mean, you must run into all kinds of blends of different, where AI is going to blend with robotics, where robotics is going to blend with nanotechnology or biotech, et cetera.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it is really the combinatorial power of these technologies as they converge and create, these new possibilities that, and it's changing so fast, right? And that's the thing that's amazing about this is I've never seen any technology change as fast as AI. So AI, I think, is the poster child of exponential technologies. But when you converge that with blockchain, you converge it with robotics, you converge it with material science. Now you got something that's really incredible.
It's like adding an exponential. It's like adding an exponent to the already exponential growth.
That's right. It's exponential to the exponential.
So again, though, so what is your, like, do you work for why don't you explain your career? Like, do you work for a university or do you consult with businesses full time?
Yeah. So a little bit about my background. So I started out as an engineer. So I have an engineering degree. I went to Silicon Valley because I wanted to be in the heart of computer technology. So I worked at two very fast growing technology companies, computer companies, one of which did an IPO. So that experience was really phenomenal for me in my growth, because I got to experience firsthand, the power of technology and the power of entrepreneurship. So right there and then I was hooked. I said, this is what I want to do. And so after those two companies that I worked for, I decided that I wanted to go work for a large software company. So I joined Oracle, and I worked at Oracle for 10 years in the consulting business. And I was working with large Fortune 500 companies.
Out in California?
So I started in California, and then I moved to Minnesota just in the beginning of my career at Oracle. Okay. And so I was working on business processes and technology adoption, helping companies with their business needs. And then what happened is I had a boss at Oracle who had become a CIO. So he left Oracle, became a CIO. And I thought that I would like to pursue a CIO career myself. So he invited me to go work with him. He showed me the ropes, and he gave me the responsibilities that I needed to grow the experiences that I didn't have before in my career, to make me more well-rounded and ready for a CIO career. And then when the right opportunity came along, I became the CIO of a software company in Chicago. So my career has been focused on technology, primarily software technology. And then 7 years ago, I decided to retire from my corporate job and just do my own thing. So I created my own company called Brainius. And I think of Brainius as my little lab, right, where I can experiment with a number of different things and do interesting things and see what works, what doesn't work. So I've launched products, I've launched companies, I've run conferences, I've done some teaching, I've done some consulting. So I've done a number of different things under that Brainius umbrella. Wow. But it's all around technology. So my focus has always been technology. So that's a little bit of the background. Okay. And I'm also on the advisory board of TLI, Technological Leadership Institute, at the University of Minnesota. So I'm very interested in education as well. So I am connected to education. I don't teach there, but I am on the advisory board. So anyway, so that was the first book. And then, like I said, one of the platforms that I mentioned in my first book was AI. And I said, man, I got to write a book about AI.
That was the one that stuck out.
That's the one that stuck out.
Yeah.
And I was really excited about what was about to happen with AI. But I wanted to give it a different outlook. I want the emphasis to be a little bit different in the second book. The first book was very business focused.
And what year were these books come out?
So the first book came out in December of 2020.
Okay.
And then the second book came out in May of last year.
Okay.
Yeah. So
right in
about
the middle of the big...
2 weeks apart, 2 years apart. And so with the AI book, I started writing it about 6 months to a year after I wrote the first book. And it took me a lot longer to write the second one just because I didn't have as much time as I had put aside for the first book. So it went through waves. It took me 2 years because I started writing it, and then I had some other things that I was working on, so I put it aside.
Was it more intensive research too, because you were focused on one topic instead of 8?
I don't know that I would say it was more intensive, but it was a lot of work to research it, and writing takes time. If you want to do a good job writing, it really takes time and effort.
And something original.
Exactly.
You don't want to just copy paste a bunch of ideas that other people have already
Absolutely
articulated. You want to see something new.
Yeah, and so I like to do a lot of research because I want the book to be solid, right? It's fact based, so I do spend a lot of time researching, and as you research, you find different pieces of information that you want to capture in your book, but I want to give it my voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way I like to write is I like storytelling. I don't want the book to be some boring, dry, fact-based, manual kind of thing. I want it to be engaging. I want it to tell a story, and so it takes effort, to do that and do that well. So it took me 2 years to get the second book done.
I see we have a copy here that you gifted us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we can also touch on that. So it's not just that, like you talked about your tone. Like I want to make this like a story, not just a manual.
Yep.
But you also have to ask, and I think any publisher would ask, oh, you're going to write a book about AI. Mm-hmm. What's your angle? Mm-hmm. Right? Is it how AI is going to not just help or hurt, but like how? And I see your angle is you in the future of artificial intelligence. So the book's called Soulful.
Yep.
So talk about that angle.
Yeah. So I think that's a great point, right? Because I have read so many books about AI, all kinds of books, and some are pretty good, some are maybe not so good. And I think the ones that I think are not so good are the ones that get boring, right? You start reading after the chapter 3, it's like, okay, this is repetitive. It's not giving me any insights. So I want it to be insightful. I want it to be something that people enjoyed reading. And I wanted to capture this juxtaposition of being human, right? The soft, the emotional, the soulful aspect of being a human being versus the analytical, the hard, the computer side of AI.
Which is interesting because that's what people's fear of AI is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That it's going to displace the real, the soulful.
Right. And I think, I wanted to, first of all, help people understand the changes that are coming. So they understand what's real, what's hype, how AI is going to be impacting different industries. I wanted them to capture the tools that they need to be successful in this environment. So I wanted them to learn what are the skills they need to develop in order to collaborate effectively with AI. And then I wanted to also provide them with an optimistic view of the future, because I had been reading a lot of negative views of AI, just exactly what you said, the fear, right?
Yeah, it's all over.
Is AI going to take my job? Is AI going to exterminate humanity? And just goes on. And I wanted to give it a positive view of the future, granted with all the concerns that are legitimate. We have several ethical concerns that we should be thinking about, we should be debating, we should be talking about, should be developing guardrails. So I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about the challenges that we have to get to a future where we can really gain the most benefit from AI and from all these other exponential platforms. But I paint a possible future where, imagine a future where AI can help us produce all the materials that we need to meet our human needs. For every human being to have their human.
So you lay out a roadmap for how we could integrate AI in a responsible way?
I talk about how that is a possible scenario in the future where AI produces abundant materials so that all of our needs are met through AI. I talk about a potential future where not only we can produce abundance, but we can distribute that in a way that's fair to everybody. So, everybody benefits, not just the elites.
Yeah.
And that involves, that goes into a little bit of a discussion on economics. And I think you would appreciate this because that technology is deflationary. Right, and so I believe if we keep the balance right, that the deflationary forces of technology could take us to a place in the future where things become affordable and every human being can have a life of dignity, a life of, that where their material needs are met. And then the third piece of this is, imagine a future where the machines can do the work that we don't want to do, so that we humans can just focus on the things that we enjoy doing, right? So there are lots of things that I think human beings like to produce, like to create, like to do work. But there's some aspects of the work that we don't like to do. So let the machines do the things that we don't like, so we can focus on the creative aspect of the things that we like to do.
Are you able to distill that right now for us? Like, because these are such enormous concerns about AI, displacing jobs, creating all this chaos because we don't know what's, deep fakes, what's real, what's not.
Yeah.
Making sure it's the fruits of AI are shared, evenly, or at least in some way where everyone gets at least a little benefit.
Yeah.
I don't know. Are you able to kind of summarize some of those points? Because those are such big issues that I see debated on Twitter. I know are being discussed at, all these big tech companies.
Yeah.
And if you've come up with some novel ideas, I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So I don't know that they are necessarily novel, but I think, so let me try to unpack this a little bit for you. So let's start with, is AI going to take my job?
Yeah.
So I think it's very difficult to predict the future, right? Let's start with that premise. But what we can do is we can look at some of the signals that we're seeing today, and we can try to extrapolate that into the future, and we can sort of, create a high-level understanding of what that future might look like. So anything that is algorithmic in nature, and that means anything that can be done by just following a set of instructions. I think those types of tasks are likely going to be exposed to automation. In other words, anything that can be automated will likely be automated. Right? So jobs that are very prone to automation, especially things that can be digitized, those types of jobs I think will eventually be reduced or potentially eliminated altogether. Now, there are other types of jobs where, and that's where the soulful aspect of things comes in, where that human element is really important. And so I think those jobs that require empathy, jobs that require building trust and relationships. Think of the role of a salesperson, right? It's all about relationships. Or nurse or doctor, any of those jobs. I think that human element will continue to be part of the equation.
We're humans.
Exactly.
We want humans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those jobs, they're not going to go away. Now, it's possible that, some jobs, you may become more efficient in doing those jobs, and we may not need as many people as we have now doing those jobs, just because people are going to become more efficient. So I think there is a potential for a future where some jobs will be eliminated, some jobs will become more efficient, and some jobs are just going to leverage AI to do the things that AI does well, but also leverages that human capability that's essential for some of these jobs. So I don't think it's a black and white kind of answer. I think it's a mix, and I think things will evolve.
And do you think it'll happen gradually enough for people to keep their feet beneath them?
Well, so that's a really important question, right? Because things are changing extremely fast.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that it's going to be as gradual as we would like it to be. I think it's going to happen very, very fast. And some changes will happen faster than others. But eventually, I think we will get to a situation in the future, and I don't know how long it's going to take, if it's 10, 20, 50 years, but eventually I think we're going to live in a world where machines are doing most of the work, and we have human beings involved in a few aspects of the work. And if that's true, then we could potentially have a problem, because if people don't have jobs, then how are they going to generate the income that they need for their
Right.
for their day-to-day needs? But there's another side to that equation of AI, because AI can really help us become a lot more productive. And we can become productive in a sustainable sort of way. So today, the way we produce things, a lot of it is based on this extraction production system, where we extract things from the earth and we extract things from human labor to create the things that we need, the materials, the food, everything that we consume. Now imagine a world where the machines are not just extracting, but they're building things from zero, from molecules, from atoms, combining these molecules in ways that can create this abundance. It's called a production system. And there's some great literature that, if you want to...
Go ahead.
So there's some great researchers and literature that talks in more detail about what that looks like. But the whole idea is that, we could have a sustainable future where we're not, destroying the environment. We're not, creating side effects to this, and that could be abundant in nature. And then the question then becomes, okay, so we're going to create this abundance. So that means, there's going to be a part of society that's already going to be richer and richer. And then there's going to be the majority of us that are going to be, without jobs and without materials and without food and without the things that we need. But the counter to that is, if you think about technology and what technology enables you to have, think about your smartphone and all the functionality that you get for free on your smartphone that you had to pay for before, right? Directions, you get a free map that tells you where to go.
Free camera.
Phone calls. I remember, back in the days when I was a college student, I was having a long distance relationship with my wife before we were married, and our phone bills were just crazy, because we were making these long distance phone calls. And today you can talk all day long to somebody in China and it's free, right? So it's technology is deflationary. Now, if you apply that same concept to a broader production system where we're creating all these things in a sustainable manner, and the cost goes down exponentially, then you could have a situation where most people could be able to have an affordable life with very little cost, right?
Oh, sure.
So that's sort of the future that I prefer to think about, that I prefer
that side of it. So yes, things will be redundant because we have this new AI will consolidate processes so that we might not need, as much labor doing all of these different things. So jobs will become redundant, but everything will also become cheaper.
Right.
So, okay, so that brings the prices of things down, or it means we have more access to stuff, to goods and services more affordably. That is great. Just like we can buy a phone, which aren't cheap, but if we have one phone, we can then have basically in our pocket all of these other devices in one. I get that. The issue though is that if my job is redundant, then how am I earning an income?
Right.
And so is there a distribution element to your vision where basically it's sort of like a what's that called? Basic come on.
UBI.
UBI.
Universal Basic Income.
So that's a great question. So let's dig into that a little bit. But before we do that, I just wanted to give you a reference. Tony Seba, he talks about this production system, and he talks about not too far into the future, the average person being able to live on $3,000 a year.
Oh, really?
So imagine that. Imagine if you can live a good middle
seems-
class
wow.
life. I know it sounds.
It does sound ridiculous.
It sounds
but
ridiculous. It sounds extreme, and the timeline that he has is even more ridiculous. I don't agree with his timeline.
Just the housing. I want to know the answer to that.
So the housing, 3D printing,
Okay.
material science, we can create housing at a much cheaper
Okay.
rate than
I
we
see.
have today. So I talked about that in the Exponential Era book.
Mm.
So look up Tony Seba. He has some great thoughts on this, and I think it's an interesting reference.
Yeah. I might pull it up a little right now, actually. Go ahead.
Yeah. So where were we going with this conversation? So we're talking about
The distribution.
the distribution and the deflationary force of technology. So just to be clear, we have these opposing forces that we deal with today.
Mm-hmm.
Technology is deflationary.
Yep.
Technology is growing exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
So the cost of goods should go down. Okay, so that's the good news.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the bad news. We have this thing called inflation. So why do we have inflation, right? Well, there are several reasons why we have inflation. But so we have this Fed policy that believes that,
You're bringing monetary policy into this.
monetary
Okay.
policy, we want to keep inflation at 2%.
Mm-hmm.
We want to keep unemployment low, right?
Yep.
Which sounds great, but here's reality. If technology is exponential and powerful, the future is deflationary and unemployment is going to be high. Okay, so it contrasts to this whole monetary policy of keeping inflation at 2% and keeping employment at a certain level. And the way we go about doing that today is by printing money, right? And when I say printing money, I'm not saying literally printing dollar bills. I'm talking about these monetary policies that are inflationary in nature. So, in the 2008 financial crisis, we issued trillions of dollars in money that was inserted into the economy. With COVID, we gave money to individuals, right? I think we all sort of got a check in the bank, whether you needed it or not. You got a check, that was paid for with what? Printing money. So printing money is very enticing because it solves the short-term problem. But how are you going to pay for that, right? You pay for that, you're borrowing from your future. And if, our political system, our, monetary policies are going to continue to be, let's print money now and we'll deal with that later, then you're going to have these opposing forces of inflation and deflation. And which one is going to win, I don't know. But if we just let the deflationary forces do its job, eventually we would get to the point where everything is cheap to the point where you don't need much in terms of income. You don't even need a job. So whether your income is coming from UBI or just by doing some other kinds of work that people will pay for,
Mm-hmm.
using the human creativity and entrepreneurial spirit.
Right. Like the internet has allowed many more jobs.
Yeah.
It could be a YouTube.
Exactly.
You can make money or selling items off. I can create items at home, arts and crafts, and sell them online or whatever.
So use that human creative capability to create things, whether it's digital or physical, that you can sell. Now imagine if we go to Tony Seba's scenario where you can live on $3,000 a year. You don't need to do a ton of it. You don't need to sell $100,000 worth of stuff. You sell $3,000 worth of stuff.
But
if stuff is cheap enough, then you're okay.
But
yes,
the monkey wrench is the although I bet if you look at it really big picture, you'll find that the runaway monetary policy is somehow in a big picture way linked to the exponential technologies.
Yeah.
Because it has made society more fragmented, difficult to contain,
Yep.
More unease, more mistakes.
Yep.
Whoops, COVID gets out of a lab, if you buy it, if you believe that. Oops, we need to make people happy. Oh, we need to spend more because now we got to shut the country down because COVID's out. And I almost bet, I think that in a big picture, like kind of way, they're linked. And so like the kind of the unraveling or the coming apart of the order with which a nation state had kind of kept things contained is no longer realistic. That's my belief.
Yeah.
In the internet age.
Yeah.
Or AI, AI. I mean, I think it's just like blockchain wouldn't be possible without the internet. I don't know if AI would be either. Probably not.
Yeah.
So, anyway, but I suppose if you want to just theorize, you could say if we just didn't have this runaway monetary policy, we'd all be able to live on $3,000 a year.
Yep.
But we can't because in it'll be 30,000. Because of the way money's being, printed.
Exactly. So, imagine this future, right? If you put
So
away,
telling everyone to buy Bitcoin is what you're saying.
Well, so Bitcoin is interesting, right? So it plays into this conversation. But think about this future, and whether it's going to be 10 years or 50 years, I don't know. But just imagine the possibility where we have this future, we have abundance, and we can have the deflationary mechanisms to make sure that distribution is across all of humanity. So the question is, how are we going to get there, right? It sounds wonderful, but I think we're going to have to deal with the realities that we have in front of us today, and we're going to have to cross that chasm, and I call it a chasm in the book, before we get to that future, because we have some really difficult problems right now that we have to deal with. One is the debt, right? We have this enormous global debt. And the debt came about because it's very easy for you to print money. It's very easy for you to borrow money, right? So you're borrowing from the future. So we got this enormous debt that we got to pay for. We have an environment that's falling apart, right? Whether you're talking about whether you believe in global warming or not, but it's the all the species that are under that are endangered. It's the extraction mindset that is removing everything from the earth to the point where there may not be much left when you're done, and this is causing some problems that we need to address. So we have all of these huge problems that we need to deal with before we get to that potential future. One of these problems is, inequality and the social problems that inequality is causing, which generates division, which generates conflict.
Yeah.
So that's the world that we're living in right now. Yeah. It's a world of conflict, of inequality. And we're going to have to get past that to get to that future. And there are no easy answers. But, in the book, I offer a few suggestions of things that I think we need to do. So one of it is we need to unite, So if you just look at what's happening in the U.S. in our political system, it's so divided. There's so much divisiveness in this process. And we need to think about, humanity as a united front against all these challenges that we need to deal with. We have, inequality. We have, now we have wars that are breaking out across the globe. The environment. So, it's difficult to really envision and talk about this bright future when the reality that we're facing right now doesn't look so good, right?
The problem with these disruptive technologies is that they disrupt social order.
They do, and we're going to have to deal with that disruption, right?
Do you see hope in maintaining the institutions we have, or in recreating them?
So here's the way I like to think about this. So I see this as an epic change management challenge, right? So I've spent my entire career helping companies adopt technologies and deal with change. Now, it's not easy. Technology, like you said, is disruptive. It changes things. Your job changes. The way you do things changes. So think of that change management problem from a global perspective for all of humanity, not just for businesses. That's what we're dealing with right now. So how are we going to get through this change process effectively? How are we going to do this well so that at the end we arrive at that bright future? Well, so you can look at the change management literature, and there are some really specific steps that you can take in order to get there. And it starts with a vision, right? So you have to have that vision of a possible bright future so that we can all sort of see it and say, oh, yeah, this is what we're working towards. So if you don't have that vision, and I think that's part of I see as a problem today. We don't have that leadership. We don't have.
I think companies are going to be fine, right? As long as the nation that they are incorporated in is okay. At least as long as it survives, the companies are going to do just fine.
Some
right?
will,
because they're some companies have had some turmoil.
Yeah.
But you haven't seen like mutinies and. Nothing like happened on January 6th has happened on any major company that I'm aware of. Like the companies are fairly, again, there's been like protests and walkouts because of racial justice or Me Too or some of these social movements, but there hasn't been anything that has really rocked the boat that I can recall anyway.
Yeah, I think the challenge with companies is what they're struggling with is, all of these exponential platforms are bringing significant changes to their businesses. And so they have to figure out, how do I survive all these changes? And so we got into a whole new set of things that they can do to get, to the point where they not only survive, but thrive. And a lot of it is going back to those methods that I talked about, using design thinking, agile, lean, and a lot of it goes back to using things that startups are really good at, which is pivoting, doing experiments and seeing what works well, what doesn't work well.
It just seems like at the corporate level, a company, even a monster companies, even a non-tech monster company like say Walmart, they would be able to institute changes that would trickle down, and I think would be fairly, unless they were crazy, like they would be obeyed. People would be pretty unified. Some might quit, whatever, but it isn't going to threaten the company.
Yeah.
But that kind of call for unity, and again, Walmart I think could rally up its employees and say, hey, let's all chip in to help Haiti. They had an earthquake or whatever, right? And they would probably raise a bunch of money. And I don't know. I mean, maybe that's a bad example, but it just seems to me like at the corporate level, they're able to that sort of institutional societal structure is sound.
Yeah.
Whereas you talk about teaching these things to a nation state.
Yeah. Hey,
you need to be agile. You need to be like, can you imagine having that discussion with Biden or Trump? I mean, it's like, to me, it's like, forget about it.
Yeah.
Like it's just completely unrealistic.
Yeah.
So I don't know what hope there is for a country like the U.S. to embrace this change. It seems like at every corner it's failing.
Yeah.
And the change is threatening it.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think you raised some good points. And I would say, so first of all, change is not easy. Whether you are an individual, just think about how hard it is for us as people to change our habits, right? It takes a lot of concerted effort to it takes 30 days for you to develop a new habit. And during those 30 days, you have to be very disciplined, right? So it's not easy, whether it's you're an individual, a corporate entity, or a nation state. But the point that I think is really important is that we need people with a vision that can help us get there. And I think a lot of it starts with education. So we need to educate people. We need to let people know, look, things can be a lot better than they are if we do these things right. And I think, the general society and population, if they have that awareness, then they are in a much better position to choose the right representatives, choose the leaders that are going to get us there. But if everybody's lost and everybody's hopeless and everybody's saying, well, we're never going to survive because, we have all these problems, then there's no hope, right? Then we're sort of lost. So we need to educate people, and that's what I try to do.
The catch-22 is that we need an educated, what you're saying is we need an educated populace to choose good leaders. Unfortunately, the bad leadership are the ones that are in charge of educating, right?
Well,
it's the catch-22.
To an extent, right? But I think we can all play a role in this, right? So I think you and I,
agreed,
we can do our part in trying to educate. So this conversation right here is part of that process. We're educating people. People are going to be listening to this, and maybe they never thought about, really, could I live on $3,000? Is that real? Right? And I think there will be a lot of people that are going to say, oh, that's baloney. It's never going to happen. Well, so I would encourage people to do some research. Read Tony Seba, read other people like Peter Diamandis. Learn about what's possible, because there is a possibility for a bright future. But we need to work towards that. We need to unite. We need to figure out ways to get there. And it starts with understanding the possibilities and working together to get there.
Yeah. Simple as that.
It's very simple. Deep, difficult.
No, I see a lot of hope in every little podcast, every little YouTube video, every little blog article, social media post even that's put out. I think the answer to technology's disruption is to use the very same technology, fight fire with fire, right? So the technology that's disrupting everything will be the very technology that will help us through this. It will help build new. So the Khan Academy is a great example of that, right? And how it can, it's helped so many kids learn around the world.
Right.
As the school systems struggle, these internet-based platforms are stepping up.
Yep.
And I suppose then maybe through these other non-governmental resources, people could become more educated and then maybe be wiser voters.
Yep.
But again, it's just the idea that, is the system itself compatible?
Yeah.
The political system compatible with an internet world? I don't know. That's kind of the big.
Yeah. So
it seems little countries can do more. They're more agile,
Yeah.
But a big monster like the U.S., it's hard.
Well, I think you raise a good point in that, the technology is changing faster than the ability of our political systems and our infrastructure to deal with these changes. So that's why I go back. It's a change management problem, right? The external environment, the world is changing much faster than we can come up with the right policies, with the right structures, with the right ways to deal with these technology changes. And it's only going to get worse because technology will continue to change at a faster pace than our ability to deal with it. And that's my concern. It's just, how do we deal with these changes?
So what's your glass half full perspective on the future of the U.S.? Like, things will settle down, and we'll use these tools wisely. People will calm down. We'll start to elect cooler heads into office, and they'll institute more progressive policy and so forth, technologically progressive, knowledgeable policy.
Yeah. So my glass...
We'll cut spending, maybe? I don't know.
My glass half full vision is that, like I said before, technology will help us become more productive. And if we produce more, by definition, if there's more products chasing fewer dollars, that is deflationary in nature. So that will drive deflation. And the cost of having a good standard of living will continue to go down. And this is not, some fantasy thinking that's, impossible. We're already living that today. If you look at poverty across the globe, we have reduced poverty considerably. Even countries that are developing countries. Think of the one that I know really well, which is Brazil, where I was born. 30 million people were lifted out of poverty in the last few decades. It's not that things are perfect, much the opposite. There's a lot of problems still, but we're moving in the right direction. And with the technologies growing exponentially, the ability for us to pull people out of poverty will continue to increase, despite the political issues that we have, despite the things that are wrong that we have to deal with. The technology is going to be there. The technology is going to continue to drive some of these benefits and some of these improvements. So obviously we're going to have obstacles. I'm not a huge. I believe in the democratic system. I think it's the best one that I know of. The alternative is terrible. So this is what we have. This is what we have to work within. It's not perfect, but that's what we have, and we gotta deal with whatever challenges that brings to us. But despite of the political system, despite of whatever happens from a nation state standpoint, we have this global movement of technology being incorporated across the globe, lifting people out of poverty, raising the standard of living, raising our lifespan, which is really incredible. If we think about the beginning of the 20th century, in the early 1900s, life expectancy back then was like in the 40s, right?
Right.
If you live to be 50, you're lucky. Today, our life expectancy is in the 80s, and it's going to continue to expand. In fact, I was just listening to a show today where they're saying that if you are 65 years old today, your chances of making to 93 is 50%. So, I mean, that's incredible.
Tell my mom.
It's incredible, isn't it? That we can now expect to live into our late 80s, early 90s. Just 100 years ago, the life expectancy was half of that. So there's a lot of positive things that happen in the world.
Big picture.
That the news doesn't capture, because that doesn't sell very well, right?
It's big picture stuff. It takes time to look at it, and people are pretty, they want snappy content.
So that's my glass half full vision for the future. It's not going to be easy. I don't want to dismiss the challenges that we have. I don't want to dismiss the process that we need to go through to get there, which will be difficult. But I think there is a potential for a bright future.
I agree. I just think it's a ways out. I worry it's going to be a ways out.
Yeah, it could be.
I compare it to the printing press and what it did to Europe.
Yeah.
I'm not a historian, but I know generally that the printing press came out, that enabled the Reformation, and there were a lot of bloody years of Catholics and Protestants duking out for power.
Yeah.
But now we've got all these different forms of Protestantism, and the Catholics wouldn't always agree that that's a good thing. But I think it's kind of cool that we've got Mennonites and Amish and Southern Baptists. I think the more potential for people to express their spirituality, the better.
Yep.
And I think the internet allows that. And but the governing mechanisms need to calibrate or be compatible with the new technologies.
Yeah. And I think that will evolve over time, right? So it's sort of hard to.
But while they're failing, societies fail, right?
Yeah.
So police systems fail, and crime goes up.
Yeah.
And you talk about life expectancy; it's actually just dropped.
Yeah.
So in the short term, if when you just say what you said, people are listening, they're going to say, "What is she talking about?"
Yeah.
But you're right. Like, we forget how good it is compared to where it has been.
Yeah.
Perhaps for all of history.
Yeah.
But in the last 10, 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
it's, life expectancy in the U.S. has gone down because health has deteriorated because there were a bunch of COVID deaths. I don't know if that was a factor, but people, I don't know, violence is a factor. I don't know what exactly is a factor. Bad health because we're eating poorly.
Yeah.
But life expectancy is decreasing.
Yeah.
It went to like 70, low 70s for men or something like that.
Yeah.
So
that curve,
but I think that's a dip in the otherwise rising.
So you got to look at the long term, right? So you see the trend, and we're going to have ups and downs in that journey, right? Just like the stock market, right? It goes through ups and downs, but eventually it keeps going in the right direction.
Agreed.
Yeah.
These are just doozies of unprecedented bridges to cross.
Yeah.
Now, one thing people are also usually not too good at is you have to almost presume that a technology will come along that we can't see right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about like materials, are you saying that with the presumption that AI will figure it out? Like, I don't know, but AI will figure it out. Like, is there sort of a presumption there that we don't know how it'll happen, but AI will indeed figure things out that we haven't been able to ourselves, whether it's curing a disease, whether it's figuring out how to mix these molecules and make food out of a lab, so we don't have to wait, 4 months for carrots to grow.
Yeah, it's already happening.
Okay,
it's happening today. So there was a recent article that came out, talks about hundreds of new materials that have been discovered by AI.
Really?
So AI is already giving us new possibilities in terms of these materials. And again, when you combine, these exponential platforms, when they start to converge and you add AI to material science, to robotics, to all these different platforms, it accelerates that process, and it's really incredible. I think one of the areas that I'm really optimistic about is just the impact it's going to have on healthcare. Healthcare needs major improvement, and I think AI is going to be huge in helping us find new cures, develop new drugs, and then, converging with robotics, just robotic surgeries, materials, new materials that we can use. There's something called bioprinting where you can actually print human organs using 3D printing. I mean, how amazing is that, right? Of course, these things are evolving. We're not there yet in a lot of these things, but we're moving in that direction.
So, we're Minnesota blockchain, and what are your thoughts on that technology from your first book? What did you pick up? It was one of the 8 technologies. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on it? Perhaps how it works with AI or works on its own as a agent of change, agent of disruption, but also solution?
Yeah. So I think blockchain has great potential. I think the whole idea of decentralization is a great way to think about some of the things that we need to solve for. And with blockchain in particular, I like the idea of transparency. I like the idea of decentralization. I like the idea of having a permanent record that you can audit at any point in time. So the concepts behind blockchain, I think make a lot of sense. Now, where it becomes challenging, and I can tell you from personal experience, is putting that into applied technologies that you can use in everyday living. So one of the entrepreneurial things that I did in the last few years, and I think it's one that I didn't mention, but was related to sports, was I was working with another company, another partner, and they were trying to sell sports tickets in blockchain. And the whole idea was that, today you buy a ticket, it's a piece of paper, and you may keep that as a collectible, maybe worth something someday, but it's just a piece of paper. Now imagine, that ticket as a utility, an NFT that can become a collectible, but also that can give you, other kinds of ways to engage with that sports team, right? Whether it's, they can send you videos,
Right.
they can send you, the ability to have some kind of activity with the team, with the
Yep.
players. So, the imagination is the limit there.
Yeah.
And we actually started, doing some business development around that. But it goes back to change management. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to change the existing processes,
Right.
the existing structures. And so the challenge with a lot of these technologies is going through that change management process.
Right. So like memberships, fan engagement. Did you have these conversations with one of those soccer
Oh
clubs?
yeah, absolutely. Several of them, and they all love the idea, right? But the practicality, and you have some dominating players that deal with tickets today, and they
Right. Yeah,
don't
that was something else I was
necessarily-
going to mention.
they don't necessarily want to disrupt what's working today and what's making money, right?
Well, exactly. So I was going to mention that when you talked about AI and these technologies helping healthcare,
Yeah.
and well, is that what these companies want? Do they want these cheap medicines distributed? Do they want these solutions to these health problems suddenly happening? Because that's a huge part of their business.
Well, so it's the innovator's dilemma, right?
Yeah.
So this is something that I always talk about in my talks. I like to mention, Dr. Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma book, because in the book he asks this fundamental question. I think it's probably one of the most important questions that business leaders ought to be asking themselves, which is, should you cannibalize your still profitable business so that you can focus on yet unproven opportunities, right? That's the big question. It's hard to do. It's not easy. Very few companies are willing or able to do that. But that's sometimes what we need to do. And so the thing that I usually recommend to companies is you have to be ambidextrous. You have to keep doing the things that you're doing now that's keeping, the lights on, but you got to be putting some resources on the future as well. And start experimenting with new things because, this cash cow that you have right now is not going to last forever. And in the current environment, it's going to go away faster than you can imagine.
Is that your main source of income? Is that what you spend most of your time doing right now professionally? Is consulting with companies on how to proceed, how to move forward in this new era?
Yeah. So lately, I've done some consulting work, and some of the work that I do is helping companies adopt new technologies and improve their business processes. Some of it may be related to emerging technologies, some are not, and also advising companies on business strategies in general.
Yeah.
So
is that part of Brainius?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So within Brainius, I have three main categories of business threads, if you will. One is what I call media and education. So it's all the work I do around, it's the books that I've written, it's the speeches that I give, it's the education programs that I'm developing with the University of Minnesota, and other things that I've done in the past around just thought leadership in general.
Yeah, I didn't mention this earlier, but we met at an AI conference,
right,
where you were the featured speaker for these IT architects.
Yes.
Is that the right way to?
Yeah. It's the Midwest Architecture Community Group.
Yeah, and when I saw that, I thought, oh, they're architects, but they're IT architects. So they're building
That's right.
I don't know. I don't even know exactly what was the term. What are they building? They're building.
They're architecting IT systems.
Okay,
so,
they're building IT systems.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So so I have that media and education side of the business. The second side of the business is the consulting aspect, where I do. Right now, I'm doing primarily interim leadership, where I may take on an initiative for a company as an interim executive. There's strategic advising, where I may sit down with a CEO or a business leader and just help them think through their business strategies. And then the third one that I'm focusing quite a bit of time on now is just helping companies roadmap their AI trajectory. So I'm partnering with some other firms here in town, one of which is run by Justin Gremmons, who you may know. He runs Recursive Awesome, which is a strategic consulting firm focused on AI. So I'm partnering with him and a group of other independent consultants to provide these kind of AI road mapping capabilities to companies locally here and throughout the country as well. So, and then the third piece of my business is what I call emerging technologies. And that's where I've done the work with, developing and providing business development capabilities to streaming and blockchain ticketing and customer relationship management and all of these things.
Wow. I would think one of those three would be enough.
Yeah, and I don't do it all simultaneously, right? So one of the things that I've been very conscious about since I left the corporate world is I'm very protective of my time. So, I don't do all these things simultaneously. So I dedicate time to specific things at different points in time.
It's all right. We're going to all live to be 100. It's fine. We got plenty of time. Well, any last words? Any last thoughts?
So I think the last thoughts that I would leave with you and your audience is, I know this is a challenging time for a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people that are scared about, what AI is going to do, and it's I think it's okay to have some of these concerns. But it's also important to become educated, right? And to really separate the hype from reality. Start there. Don't believe everything that you see or read in the media, but try to educate yourself and understand, the changes that AI is going to bring to the world. And then embrace it, because the train has left the station. We're not going back. This thing is here. It's here to stay. So try to learn as much as you can about it. Engage with it. Learn how to work with it. It's actually a lot of fun if you spend time working with whether it's ChatGPT or if you're doing some work with Gemini or Perplexity, whatever it is. Spend some time working with it, and it's really quite incredible how far we've advanced with some of these systems.
Yeah, I've been behind on a lot of this. I haven't kept up, super up to date with all the different potentials. So to hear about some of them here in this conversation has kind of excited me, hearing about this stuff. So I agree completely with you. If you kind of get back with the current and swim with the current, it's quite a ride, quite an exciting ride we're about to. That we're on now, and continue to be
I think the benefits I think will outweigh the risks. Obviously, there's risk in anything in life, right? I mean, you're driving a car down the road, you're taking a risk, but I think the benefits could be tremendous. So I tend to be optimistic about the future, and again, not dismissing the challenges that we have in front of us right now that are not small.
Well, I'm glad you're one of the experts working with companies to get over those challenges and move us into the next era.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for your time today.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure, great conversation. Really appreciate it.
So did we. All right.
All right.
See ya.